Let's talk a little bit about the tools, right? There's different ways to do this, and there's constantly new tools coming out, right? Someone was mentioning VS Code Live. I think it was Joseph W. I'll show that real quick. VS Code Live is decent. Um, so there's a lot of different tools. I know JetBrains, the makers of IntelliJ, have been working on some tooling to allow for this. What do we use? What do you like? Can anyone talk about that?
Yeah, I've tried almost every one of these modes of working, and I kind of divvied it up into six different categories, starting with just Zoom and someone watching. I fall asleep when that happens. So it does need to be engaging so that multiple people can control the keyboard. So some people will very quickly say, "Well, what if we just share the ability to expose the ability to type in remotely to my machine?" It doesn't work well either because of the latency when you type characters. So you quickly start looking at other options. The visual VS Code, what's it called, Live Share. Not really much of a fan, nor of the IntelliJ solution. I've tried them both; they're okay, but they have their warts. Ultimately, I think what most of us settled on is this thing called Git Handover, where basically you work on your machine in your IDE with your keyboard settings, with all your favorite configurations and so on, with a working build. You share your screen while you're driving, and then when you're done, use a Git handover tool, which essentially its job is to shuttle the code up into a temporary branch on your repository so that the next person in line driving can quickly pull it. So using these kinds of tools, specifically one called mob.sh, we're able to shift the code from one person's machine to the next in about 10 seconds on average. So there's not a lot of ceremony involved with switching from one person to the next. So it's fantastic. I basically summarize it as, if you like your IDE, you can keep your IDE, which everybody kind of loves. John, I think, had a counterpoint about people having different environments, so I'll jump over to John.
I had that comment
Oh,
actually
you had that
as
comment,
well.
wasn't John? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
but I'll just say that I've used mob.sh and it's fine. Honestly, I just prefer committing to trunk because the force of me having to get back to green is worth it. And so we do use Git handoff occasionally, but I consider that to be secondary to just get to something in 3 to 5 minutes and push to trunk. And we do that most of the time. We often don't do it, and then I agree, it's a pain. So I prefer just Git myself. But in terms of like learning, so when we used to use Mobster is a great tool if you're all sitting at the same computer because it basically pops up and then you switch who's on the keyboard and you're at a single machine. And so you effectively, because we use Git, I've been using Git for so long, you always have a branch because you have your local commits until you push them, right? And so effectively you are using Git handoff, but you're changing who's on the computer, which means you need to share the environment. And so, for example, if it was on my machine, I would turn off the VI plugin because no one uses VI. Most people don't have that sickness, right? But the nice thing about being remote is each person has their own environment. And we've got people that have the split keyboards and they use completely different key mappings for things. And it would really be a burden to them to not have their custom environment. So I used to be a big fan of saying, look, if you're on a team, we should sort of normalize our environment so that we can switch between things, which I think is an okay decision if you're co-located. But the advantage of remoting is I have my own environment. You have your own environment. We just have to find a way to make sure we share often enough so that we're all engaged. And mob.sh is a great tool for that. Trunk-based is a great tool for that. Yeah.
Some are using headless AWS instances.
Sure.
Anyone want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's one that I've seen used. I think Llewellyn Falco and Jay Bazuzzi use it quite a bit, but it's quite interesting in that they're setting up an AWS EC3 instance that everyone connects to, and that way you can use your own keyboard, and have your own keyboard set up however you want, and instead of having to switch between computers, you're actually running on the same computer. Very much like the VS Live code and the JetBrains type of thing, except that instead of working on one person's computer, you're all working on a centralized one. Yeah, I think it's a way. I think it's a fine way if that works for your team. I think it's a great one. Anything that allows you, like we're kind of talking about, to share that ability to write code on the same computer is is where you want to go with this. I think that there was a question or a comment about the committing to trunk every time, and I think the mob sh is a good example of, if you don't commit to trunk, which you should be, but if you're not doing that right now, mob sh will allow you to create a temporary branch, and everybody work on that, and then when you're done, it will commit that to trunk. It will sort of smash it all together and commit all the changes.